Before tonight's horrors unfold, drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. Your support keeps the horrors alive. Let's begin. Elizabeth, call me Liz Roundhay, was off on one of her interminable and sometimes hard-to-follow monologues that were always kissing cousins away from being a rant. As always, it was General Alejandra Diaz's onerous and detested task to listen to her. The general didn't like it, just as she loathed the woman who spoke. Diaz would do it because it was her duty, and because her predecessor and mentor, who had also happened to be the man she had respected most in the world, had told her that the objective of Project Arbela is not another American century, it is an American millennium. And Diaz was firmly convinced that the crazy English woman beside her could bring that millennium about. So it's always like that in the UK. The Sun readers and the net curtain twitchers from the Midlands only think they're voting for the moderate, sensible people. They breathe a big sigh of relief when they don't put that man, who was supported by those momentum people, into number 10. The truth, of course, is that there was nothing moderate about Thatcher and Blair. They were the leaders of extreme revolutionary movements. They just happened to be good at it. What was more conservative, with a small c, than the sons and daughters policy for the council housing list? So Granny just got tricked into voting for people she thought were conservative. Maggie destroyed those people, the wets. And when they went, the poor old C of E was also doomed, because the paternal old One Nation, Tory MP, was usually inseparable from the bishop of somewhere on the marsh. As for Mr. Blair, well, much more of a radical than Mr. Corbyn ever could be, swamped the place with immigrants, and more importantly, cultural change. But make sure Brenda and Wayne got their foreign holidays, can build their bad taste conservatories and loft conversions, then he knows they won't have the brains or inclination to stop him. Internally, Diaz thought to herself, it's always like this. The vile woman is obsessed with her boring, sissy Brit garbage that has no importance, no relevance. And I must listen. Listen, because I can't forget that it's impossible to follow a mind like hers, and I mustn't ever forget that she can fool you. Suddenly bring it all round. Suddenly it does all make sense. And I can never forget what she's making in production, Chamber 1. The woman was still talking, still going on in her annoying upper-class British voice. So I pointed out to Silverberg that I've always thought that physics is a bit like that. The point being, of course, that the physical laws are not necessarily any more obvious than human affairs, and that the means of getting Arbela to work were perhaps just as contrary. I mentioned one of those quotations from Einstein, and Silverberg got a bit annoyed, said what I was saying was nonsense and what he referred to as pathetic fallacy. So, here Roundhay gave one of her skin-crawling, tittering laughs. I was a bit naughty. I said often old Albert's ideas had seemed to people to smell of nonsense, even though they were true, even as they smelled of the gutter, like having the stink of what comes from having been dragged through the gutter for 2,000 years with no home. Then, of course, it was all for one, and one for all time. All three of them went for me. Cathcart told me my math ability wasn't even any good. Never mind anything else. Said I didn't deserve my position, that I wasn't even a real scientist. So I told him that was why it was good that dirty old shirt lifters like Alan Turing had helped to invent computers, so that I had no problem or need to worry about maths ability. Then I asked him how his husband was. As for Tsatongwa, I just asked him when he was going home to Salisbury. As he was contributing, sweet bugger all, he's half Zimbabwean, you know. Diaz stood listening to this hateful bile. She imagined what a satisfaction it would be to smash the English woman's head into the wall. Instead, she forced herself to continue listening. This time she sensed that something important was coming. Of course, continued Roundhay, what all three of the dear boys were really annoyed about was the results I've been getting. In there. She gave another laugh and pointed down the corridor, in the direction of production chamber 1. Up to this point, General Diaz had been silent. Now she quietly spoke. You know, I only read the reports after I talked to you personally. The other woman nodded. She had started to grin. Diaz noted with disgust that her teeth were dirty. She knew instinctively that the hateful bitch knew she had noticed. Diaz deliberately made her face expressionless. She was very good at this. Over the years, it had been a useful skill. Internally, she felt the excitement rising. "Call me Liz," Roundhay said. "Yesterday, after I'd made those latest little modifications to the drive unit, the sensors under the floor started to tell us that it and the test block had been off to Slimming Club, only the equivalent of a few bags of sugar, and the anomalies were periodic, fluctuating, but real. Also, you must keep in mind that the test block weighs 60 tons. In the same quiet and perfectly level voice, Diaz said, "But that can only mean—" Roundhay nodded. Slowly, she wound a tress of her long golden hair round her right index finger. She pointed to the ceiling and gave her strange laugh. "Soon," she said, almost crooning the word. Officially, the woman Elizabeth Roundhay did not exist. She was, in fact, legally dead. Officially, she had been killed in a car crash along with two other people. The two other people were in actuality very dead. Roundhay had been selected by what was referred to on the base as the PPS, the Positronic Processing System. The computer, like the base, was a product of the Cold War and what had been called Reagan's Star Wars program. The computer, which was just short of actual, fully realized AII, was programmed to trawl through everything, searching for what were simply called salient points of interest to future research. And certain points of interest had been detected in Roundhay's work at Oxford, things she had written about. The fact she was still an undergraduate was irrelevant to the PPS, so protocols had been set in motion, and the car crash had happened. That had been nearly 9 years before. The woman had been on the base in the northwestern U.S. ever since. This had been during Diaz's beloved predecessor's time in charge. She had been his number 2. Diaz had now been in charge for the last 3 years. Originally, the Arbela project had been not one undertaking, but several. The aim was simple: to create for the United States of America technology that would give the last best hope an unassailable and overwhelming advantage. To deliberately and systematically bring it into existence. That had been before Liz Roundhay had arrived. Now all roads led to what was slowly being built in Production Chamber 1. From the beginning, it was clear that "Call Me Liz" was strange. As one of the personnel said, "That girl is just wrong." It wasn't just that she was a genius. She adapted and accepted what she called her change of circumstances, which of course amounted to being effectively kidnapped by the world's greatest superpower with a speed that was frankly disturbing. She had apparently quickly realized that within certain strictly constrained bounds, that her every whim would be indulged. She was frankly dismissive of implied threats to her family. "Off the old bugger and the old cow if you want. I'm rather keen to get on with the work, if you want to know." The woman's personal habits were disgusting. It was Alejandra Diaz's job to know everything that happened on the base. Everything. She was both sick and amused when her operatives came to her and informed her that Roundhay was in the habit of leaving her dirty underwear on the floor in her living quarters. "Time of the month, dirty general." Apparently, she hardly ever changed her bra. As one of the general's staff put it, if she took it off, it could crawl away. This even though, like Diaz, Roundhay was generously built in this area. She would sometimes point to herself and the general and say, "You don't get many of these per pound," invariably accompanied by her hateful laugh. Her eating habits were, of course, vile. How anyone could eat what she called black pudding at any time, never mind at breakfast, was beyond Diaz's comprehension. Roundhay was a drunk, and it got worse. The English woman was what in the outside world, the general supposed, you were no longer allowed to call a nymphomaniac. The devastation she caused among the male personnel was considerable. Diaz often regretted that Roundhay wasn't a man. She could have dealt with that. It did no good to try and limit her contact with the male staff. The general had, in the end, been forced to arrange regular visits from men Roundhay referred to as "my special friends." Diaz had asked herself more than once, "Is this what I've come to? Is this why I struggle to get where I am? To be a pimp for a monster?" because that's what Elizabeth Roundhay was. If there had ever been any doubts about this on the general's part, they had been ended when what she always thought of as the incident had occurred. Prior to this, several deaths had already happened. As one of Diaz's officers had put it, she murdered them secondhand. About a year before the conversation in the corridor, the general had called Roundhay into her office. They had been alone. Diaz had made her face a mask. She had said nothing. She showed Roundhay what the cameras had recorded. There had been more than 2 people involved. One of them had been a technician, a boy really, barely 20. Another recording. Roundhay could be seen whispering something to the boy. Finally, a recording of a room, really a big closet where cleaning products were stored. The boy had wrapped an electrical cable around the door handle, the other end around his neck. The general had said nothing. Face a wall. Call me Liz had just shrugged. A lady has her needs, she said. And don't forget, I am a lady. I'm not one of you bourgeois. Lady Roundhay, although I don't make a fuss about it. My lot have done whatever we want since before we came south with James I. We hang dead animals heads up in our houses. We have dogs running around all the time. We're not bothered by a bit of drool. Or the fairy stories people tell kiddies to get them housebroken. Diaz said nothing. The other woman continued, Of course, with a name like yours, you're a left-footer, a mackerel snapper. Bit of guilt, but then again you can just go to confession. A practical enough arrangement. And although you only apparently exist in the good old US of A, you Hispanics get up to lots of mischief. Must be all that Indian blood. Diaz had said nothing but had quietly walked from behind her desk. Roundhay tittered and said, Anyway, I could tell he was a fairy. Touch of the lavender. It's not my fault he did a great godpan. One of Diaz's small, strong, sharp fists had smashed into a carefully calculated spot just under and to the left of the other woman's solar plexus. Apparently for females, the pain was like what happened to males when they were hit between the legs. Roundhay had collapsed retching. Quietly, the general said, Don't do it again. Thoughts about the woman were always with Diaz. She was, so to speak, omnipresent in the general's mind. Alejandra had distanced herself from her own family and background, almost completely. Heart, body, and soul she served and was devoted to her country. But she often thought of her great-grandmother when she thought of the English woman. How her grandparent would have made certain gestures if she had found herself in a room with Roundhay, after the English women had left. How the old woman would have burned bundles of herbs, taken them and made the sign of the cross in the air, sprinkled dust and perhaps water blessed by the priest into the room's corners. Diaz knew this was the way it would have been. Elizabeth Roundhay was beautiful. The general thought the correct expression was English rose. This was a rose that had some thorns. The general knew she herself was also beautiful. You didn't admit it to men, but if you were a woman, you were constantly aware of what you had. If you had it, it was a constant. It had advantages and disadvantages. But it was always there. Beauty was a burden. It had taken time, but slowly Diaz had realized one of the things that was most disturbing about Roundhay was that she didn't care. Her monstrous appetites would have been the same, regardless. But as always, it was worse. The women's own beauty had no value to its owner. It was as if someone had taken a sheet of fine silk and draped it up in a sewer. Some of the technicians called the woman the bride, as in bride of the PPS. Of course, they also meant the bride of Frankenstein. That had been a year ago. On that occasion, after crooning the word soon, Roundhay had gone on to say, I want you to get rid of the others. Let me work on my own with the technical staff. I am aware, General Diaz, that I'll never get out from under this mountain. Not alive anyway. I know the intention is to bump me off when you don't need me anymore. I know the dear boys are to be my replacements. Although I think we are both aware that those dullards could never replace me, and you'll need me for some time yet. Of course, that's only if... She had trailed off into silence. Quietly, Diaz asked, Only if what? Only, replied Roundhay, if you people want what I'm making to be an AK-47 and not a matchlock musket. You see, I know what Project Arbela is for General Diaz. As you are aware, I have access to the PPS. Good old Percy, the originator of my change of circumstances, and I could have worked it out on my own. I think it's entirely laudable, and so well named, to off the dragon or the bear, or hopefully both. Your lot should have given half of them some instant sunshine when you had the chance. My crowd should have forced more opium down the other half's throats. A nice, dopey dragon. The good old days, when the junks got junked. As for the pigs who are afraid of little piggy wiggles, afterwards your armed forces will have fine hunting, as my grandfather would have said. I wonder what North African wine will taste like when they start making it again. I can give you a conservative advantage of 80 to 120 years. That should be enough. And if it is done properly, it might as well be 1,000 years. But that's only if the unit is allowed to emerge from the production chamber. Ex nihilo. It must appear to leap into existence, fully formed, like Venus from her old dad's forehead. Of course they'll try to steal the technology. What else can you expect from dirty peasants? And I must work under the right conditions. After all, you people don't have much time. Again, she had trailed off into silence. And once again, Diaz asked her what she meant. You people don't have all that long. The two oceans? Not moats anymore. Oh dear me, no. You'll be trapped behind them, whilst the buggers take over. And there's, of course, the fact that anyone can see that chaos is coming to America. Just as anyone with any brains could have seen that the Twin Towers were in for it. What's going to happen is this. Sooner or later, two lots of so-called protesters are going to meet and have a bit of Barney. Personally, I hope those big, hairy, make America pale again pickup truck type chaps do some bowling out. They're so exciting and direct. Anyway, both groups will have guns. You people have a good few about, and they will use them. Why it's not happened before is one of those miraculous things. The fun will spread. This time there will be no Billy Yank and Johnny Reb. Just all your cities burning. That silly written constitution won't save you. Diaz simply said, Production Chamber 1. Yes, responded Roundhay. Production Chamber 1. But please don't make the mistake of imagining Percy can do it without me. The computer is like the dear boys, essentially a rather uninspired eunuch. Just as the very existence of the drive unit will bring the United back into your lot, it will do something else to the opposition. What's that? Asked Diaz. Roundhay took a wooden pencil from a pocket of her lab coat. This, she said. Her long, delicate fingers snapped it in two. You won't even need to fight them. Underneath all that muscle, they're like some boys. Fragile, because the existence of Arbela will remind them of what they secretly know they really are. The general had calmly responded that the Arbela project was entirely positive and peaceful in nature. Roundhay just laughed. General Diaz got rid of the other scientists. Another year has passed. Now General Diaz stands beside Elizabeth Roundhay on the viewing gallery, at one end and high above the vast aircraft hangar-sized emptiness of Production Chamber 1. The complex machinery and bustling technicians who normally fill it are all gone, cleared out and sealed away behind massive bulkhead doors. Diaz and the other woman stand behind a protective screen of what looks glass but isn't. The stuff is radiation resistant and could withstand a massive thermal air blast. Although Roundhay has assured her there's not a jot to worry about, the vast room before them is in semi-darkness. Only the far wall, directly opposite them, in an area just before it is brightly lit. On the far wall, one of Roundhay's whims has been indulged. A vast reproduction of the picture of the Battle of Arbela, the one unearthed in Pompeii. King Darius, terrified and ready to flee. Alexander, his eyes blazing with anger and triumph. A few yards before the wall on the otherwise empty floor, the drive unit, a large circular featureless black disc a few feet thick. Sitting atop this, carefully positioned in the exact center, is the test block, a huge 60-ton cube of solid, shining stainless steel. Roundhay has repeatedly rejected any suggestion that the weight be reduced, sometimes hysterically, in both senses of the word. The general knows exactly what the drive unit consists of. Mostly it's just layers of a fire-resistant, highly durable polymer. Threaded through this in a complex thread like latticework of various metal elements, these are all quite common ones. Although they include gold and silver, they are all only there in small, extenuated amounts. No alloys. Only, as Roundhay puts it, pure star stuff. The metal runs through the polymer in web-like layers. Between these are regularly spaced electromagnets. Unimpressive and common, disturbingly so. Even more disturbing is the fact that Roundhay is powering these with two ordinary car batteries. She had angrily refused General Diaz when she offered to jure her something state-of-the-art to act as the power source. Quietly, Diaz says, "Do it now, show me." Call Me Liz takes up a small box-like control unit and presses its single switch. The drive unit and its 60-ton burden rise smoothly in an eerie silence into the air. They hang suspended in the vast empty chamber. From under the disc there issues a shimmering silvery light, a dim halo, and from beneath glowing liquid, something. It is an impossible color, simultaneously a lustrous gold and a sickly green. The glowing something flows endlessly in innumerable running, streaming globules. These descend from beneath the disc and disappear into nothingness just before they touch the floor. They look, thinks Diaz, exactly like tears. This is the fruit of Elizabeth Roundhay's work. Project Arbela, a working, powerfully strong, anti-gravity drive system, the first in human history. Diaz, who despises all emotion, and who already knows what the project is, who of course has always known, can't keep her voice from trembling. Quietly she says, "How?" Roundhay tells her. Given that it's one of the primal forces of the universe, it's amazing that we know so little about it. There is no unifying theory. It's true that gravity is one of the fundamental forces. It's also true that it's one of the weakest. How am I able to hold this control, given that I'm supposedly fighting the gravitational force of the Earth? The basic theory is, and the dear boys you so kindly got rid of would have had positive kittens if I put it so crudely, is that mass attracting mass is because before the Big Bang, everything was one thing. I'm interested, of course, but I've always been more interested in wrapping myself around other things than my head around things like that. One of the reasons I've succeeded. Before I tell you how I got the bloody thing to work, let me ask a question. Given that what this filly has succeeded in doing is up there with the wheel and splitting the atom, I think you should indulge me. Could the ancient Greeks or the Romans have made a steam engine? Some people think they could have. If there was something Diaz usually despised, it was people who mentioned the Greeks and Romans. She now stood and listened in rapt fascination. I happen to be one of those. And all the reasons you can look up online for why they wouldn't have been able are also nice, useful, but let me ask you another question. Imagine they had done it. A railway for the legions, an imperial express. Would that mean that they would have had to have understood that water is made of H2O? Personally, I don't think so. I think they could have continued to get along with their four elements. In many ways, a much more elegant and satisfying view of the world than ours. So I didn't try to understand. I tried to make it work. That was another thing the old women, the dear boys couldn't stand, and why they would have failed. As you know, I had already made progress, but the effect was too disparate, weak. The unit was pissing the anti-gravity shadow out all over the place. I needed a means of focusing the effect. So I thought about the old Romans again. They had been like people who didn't know what a jigsaw was, had the pieces but no picture on a box, and above all, no idea there was even a game to play. I used my advantages. I went looking for the box lid, the picture, and I found it. It's a primal force. So I looked for inspiration in primal mythology. Good old Percy helped me. You should know General Diaz, Alejandro. If I may be allowed on this special occasion, I've always found it interesting that some of the old stories have everything. The entire cosmos hatching out from a single egg. Thought-provoking, and I found something in Percy's memory. One of my special friends helped me. It seems he had heard rumors. It seems that a few years before my change of circumstance, someone else had been naughty. They had fed Percy something. A book. Just an old classical book. It kind of helped me. Gave me a bit of inspiration. Please keep in mind that the picture could just be nonsense. After all, no picture is real. It just had to give me a little shove. It's gone now. The book. Percy is designed to get rid of certain things, if they relate to the project, just as he's designed to protect my notes at all costs. The book said, and I was made to see that all things were once one, at one point in time, at one place. We are not meant to see and know this. I was burned. I screamed. But I was made to look, as I am always made. From the egg that was everything flowed the tears of Nemesis. For all that is remembers that it was once one, and would like to go back. The first act of chaos was also the first injustice, and she is vengeance. For the egg was broken, I was made see, heavy the burden, from all that is flow the tears of Nemesis, forever. In their grief they are drawn to each other, in vain. They flow unseen. Here is wisdom. The skin of the egg was like unto. Roundhay reached into her lad coat and handed Diaz a scrap of paper. That General Diaz is what the focusing layer at the bottom of the drive unit is made of. It turned out to be so simple, but I could never have seen it. Like the good old Romans could never have understood H2O. Diaz looked at what was written on the paper. But you can buy this stuff in any... Interesting, said Roundhay, isn't it? Diaz points at the unit, or more specifically at the eldritch, something flowing from under it. Are you telling me that stuff? She trailed off into silence. Roundhay says, I can tell you what it's not. It's not radioactive. In fact, all the tests we've done assures us that it doesn't bloody well exist at all. And another amusing little fact, it doesn't show up on camera or recordings. In answer to what I think you were going to ask, yes, I think it's the force of gravity made visible. General Diaz turns to face her. Alejandra's face is particularly mask-like, but wears a little smile. Congratulations. She is, of course, also congratulating herself and looking forward to getting rid of Roundhay for good. But not yet, for the woman now has the means to create the other wonders she has promised. An inertia cancellation device, a viable and impenetrable force field, even a sunbeam has weight, she had once said. A powerful propulsion system. No more flying around with your arse basically on a crude big bomb. And mobility and speed. Think slightly slower than light. A gun that will fire an invisible beam of power. Imagine hitting them with all the gravitational force of every moon of Jupiter on a spot as thin as the top of a pen or as wide as a searchlight. They'll beg to be allowed to go back to wearing pigtails. For in perhaps slightly less than 4 years, a fleet of flying saucers will rise majestically above the mountain. Inside each armored, magnificent superstructure, one of the drive systems. Outside, they will be emblazoned with old glory. I think what I've created is less an anti-gravity drive and more a gravity net. I've tricked it. I can both concentrate it within the trap or empty it out. Now it's Call Me Liz who points at the unit. Anyway, I'm off to get pissed. The start of the evening's celebrations. She turns the drive system off. It slowly descends back to the floor, silently. General Diaz isn't stupid. Part of her knows that not only what, but how, Roundhay has achieved what she has is incredibly dangerous. Internally, she searches for the correct word. Unsound, she thinks. But this is overridden by the intoxication of the success. And that she thinks, I can make sure she is erased. I can do it myself. No more beyond top secret. Deep black. I can take my place in history. She dreamt her dreams. Elizabeth Roundhay walks into one of the base's communal areas, to thunderous applause and congratulations from the technical staff, many of whom are already very drunk. She gives a gracious little courtesy. Many of them look at her with rapturous adoration. Another year has passed. This is the base's final year. Now there is nothing mask-like about General Alejandra Diaz's beautiful face. It is contorted with rage, her lips drawn back from teeth. She is screaming into the communication system here in the command center in the upper levels, screaming above the howling alarm system and the dull crump of the continuous explosions from below, which are growing louder. The very mountain is shaking to its roots. What do you mean? He only sent in half the drones? Tell Blake to send them all in. Now. And get all his men down there. Tell him to kill everything that moves. Kill her. And close the main entrance. I don't care, do it. She turns suddenly and grabs Foster. The man has somehow got out of the lower levels. How she neither knows nor cares. What was a spotless dress uniform a mere hour before is a filthy wreck, covered in dust and what's unmistakably blood. The man is obviously in shock, incoherent. He must weigh at least twice what she does. But the general throws him against the wall of the command center. She slaps his face and roars at him. Tell me what's going on, man. When the man speaks, it sounds as if he is drunk. They're all dead, all of them. Generals, the senators, the vice president. Dead. She must have waited for you not to be there when they were all up in the gallery. We turned on the lights. She was sat there on a goddamn throne, in the middle of the drive unit, in a silk dress, like a call girl in Vegas. The tech staff, all in red swim trunks, lolling around at her feet. Two of the women in red numbers, like in that old show with the lifeguards. It looked like, here the man began to laugh. Diaz slapped him again. Something from that sword and sorcery shit. Diaz drags him along at this point. She issues orders, prepares to go to the lower levels herself. The man just continues to slur his story. She continues to listen. She had an honest-to-goodness gold crown on her head. It's all working, not just the main unit, the shielding, inertia cancellation, and the propulsion units. They are also gravity cannons, controls in the chair's arm. She just hosed them down, smashed everything, splashed them all over the walls. Protective screens not just gone, destroyed the walls. She pushes him away. The complex continues to shake, the ground to heave. The sirens scream and the automated system shouts, Alert! Alert! This is not a drill, all military personnel to lower levels. Below is a maelstrom of chaos and destruction. One wall of production chamber 1 is indeed gone. Roundhay is using the anti-gravity cannons to smash a tunnel through the mountain to the outside. It is time for her and her followers to leave, or nearly time. The soldiers are all dead or driven back. The drones are all smashed to smithereens. She had enjoyed that. The flying ones had come at her with state-of-the-art recoilless Gatlings that fired spent uranium bullets. The tracked ground attack models had been armed with honest-to-goodness plasma guns that some of her technicians called melt guns. The colors had been pretty, but there had been no danger. As she had once said, even sunbeams have weight. The protective force field is highly efficient. It's almost time to go. She calls her followers the cult of Nemesis. She thinks it has a nice raunchy quality, if a little cliched. Those who can come and go from the base have stored supplies in a safe place. Most necessary, she has said. The dressing down thing is a bit of a lark to annoy the general, but we don't want to freeze bits and tits off. Roundhay touches a control on her throne. General Days is in a convoy of heavily armored infantry carriers that are traveling down the main, huge, slopped ramp of the complex. The alarm suddenly goes off and a familiar tittering laugh rings out. Hello, you dirty half-breed mongrel bitch! I hope today is a salutary lesson. But don't worry, dear General Diaz. Now is not the day you eat your last taco. I've got to inform you that Percy is a little more sentient than you supposed. I did a little deal with him. He gets Mars for AI heaven. He helped me hit a few preparations. It's lesson time. Some more of that old book. It shall come to pass that Nemesis shall walk the earth, clothed in the raiment of flesh. In the person of her daughter, she shall walk the earth. She shall take up her mother's power by her own artifice, and lay waste the cities of the mighty and the haughty. Although a devotee of Venus, they shall have no mercy at her lovely hands. The mother shall come to the daughter in dreams and tell her where the secret to unlock the power is to be found. I weep for what I am forced to reveal. It will be better for many to be dead than live in that time. The first to fall shall be an eagle. Although greater than Rome, her hands are at its throat. Even now she is within its eyrie. Woe, woe, here is wisdom, on her lovely back, between her shoulder blades, the mark of her mother's budding wings. My old nanny used to say that birthmark was my fairy wings. She was wrong. Bye for now. On the disc, the cultists grovel and howl. They kiss her feet. At incredible speed, the drive unit hurtles forwards. At the last, it simply smashes through the mountain skin. It has begun.